My enemies call me Namor.
This movie marks the debut of Namor, which is a character people have been very excited about.
Yeah, me too.
Very well realized here. What were some of the most important aspects of that character that you wanted to bring to the screen, and how did you work with Tenoch to do that?
Yeah, I think for Namor, we looked at him in like three ways. You know, one is like what defines Namor, you know, in the comic books. You know, in the comic books, a visual medium. You know what I mean? So it's like green shorts, winged ankles, black hair. You know, and these are things that are consistent about him. Doesn't wear a lot of clothes. And then it's like his personality in the comic books. And he's a guy who's very long-lived. He's a guy who's kind of like a child of two different worlds. Doesn't perfectly fit into either one. And has a chip on his shoulder. And he's also a guy who's very powerful and arrogant. You know, very strong. Has a whole kingdom behind him. And has a particular point of view towards others. You know, almost xenophobic. If you say that, you know, these things are consistent about him in the comic books. He's known for being very sexy. You know, oftentimes like romancing other people's wives. You know, in the comics. It's kind of an asshole. Like you know, if you're not from Atlantis. And so all these things, you know, we wanted to, because this guy's been around, like he's maybe arguably like the oldest Marvel character, you know, so and he hasn't had any kind of live action representation, you know, not in television, not in movies. So we want to take that stuff serious, but at the same time, it all had to be in service of making a Black Panther movie. So that's when the cultural specificity and respect for the themes, you know, our film was kind of always in conversation with the history of colonization, you know, and how Wakanda escaped that, you know, and so we thought it would be interesting to carry that conversation on, but do it on another location on the planet, you know, and thinking about what culture would be interesting to juxtapose with Wakanda. It starts to become clear that maybe we look at, you know, some Mesoamerican cultures.
Only the most broken people can be great leaders. Ryan told me, go to the human being behind, the superhero, you know, the normal, the common man, because he has these superpowers, but at the end, he has the motivation of every person in the world, you know. He has to protect his family, he has to protect his people, he had to protect his kingdom and his way of life, and I think that is common for everybody all around the world. That's it, and I think that's why the people connect with the character.
There is a new world power at play.
Are you an ally or an enemy?
There's so much that connects Wakanda and Talokan. You know, how important their people are, how important the sort of rulers are to the people. But what do you find to be the major difference between those two cultures that sort of drives the conflict here?
Wakanda is a country who is hidden from the world, but they never have to leave. And actually, he said that in the movie, you know, because Talokan is a city. They made this city because they were running away from the peninsula. So in a way, they were conquered or almost conquered, and that forced them to go into the ocean, and that never happened with Wakanda. So I think that, I mean, it's the same threat, it's the same wound, but different circumstances. But yeah, at the same time, they are hiding people. Both of them have their own technology, their own culture. They develop in different circumstances, under different circumstances. At the end, they are aware of the surface and the threat of the surface.
He's coming for the surface world.
There is a nation that holds a lot of similar things without giving anything away. There is a nation that, you know, in Wakanda's mind, you know, especially for the royal family, it's like there's no one like us. That's why we're always constantly being at the forefront of a threat. We're always being attacked upon, right? But when you find another nation that's shares a lot of similarities, especially with a king that wants to protect his nation and what he's protecting. And the fact that the outside world wants to come in to both of these nations and invade, that's a bit unsettling for us, because it's not just us we have to look out for. It's bigger, so there's a lot to unpack.
Was there any concern on Marvel's part with bringing Namor to the MCU after audiences had already met Aquaman over in the DC universe? There's similarities between those characters. Was there anything Marvel went out of their way to change to avoid too much conflict?
Oh, that's interesting. Not really. I mean, we're certainly aware of Aquaman. What a big fun movie that was. Actually, one thing I know we didn't do specifically was the trident, because that is so iconic to some degree to Aquaman, but also is in publishing. Namor has a trident a ton of the time. But really, it was less about trying to avoid Aquaman comparisons and more about just trying to be more specific about Namor as a character. You know, I think I've read every Namor comic ever published, and the backstory of Atlantis is a little vague. Like, it's sort of like it doesn't feel culturally specific in any way. And one of the things I think Ryan as a filmmaker likes to do is really dive deep, and in the same way that he made Wakanda feel real because of all the specific cultural African influences, he needed what was Atlantis, what is now Talokan, to feel real by having an underpinning of something that felt true and real and in our world. And so he's also very much interested in themes of colonization, as the first film also had on its mind. And I think finding an indigenous culture who sort of faced something as traumatic as what the Spanish did to the Mayans back in the day, that still resonates with Mayan culture today, it helped us to make Namor and Talokan feel more present and more part of the Black Panther universe than if we kind of just did a direct one-to-one representation of how Atlantis is portrayed.
This movie really celebrates Latino heritage and culture in a way that we haven't really seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe yet. How did it feel for you guys to be part of that sort of tip of the spear, so to speak, you know, to be that first sort of wave of like representation in the MCU?
It had to be this one, you know, just because what the first one did. This film is so personal for so many people. Bringing us here and representing this Mesoamerican community that is Talokan is such an important thing. You know, I think a lot of kids are going to be able to see themselves, you know, looking at us, being like, oh well, you know, that kind of looks like us. You know, they have accents like us, so it's very inspiring and just an honor to be here.
And actually, the Latin community is ready years ago for these opportunities. You know, we are ready for more stories about.
We've been ready.
About the world, about diversity, about risks.
Who are you?
My enemies call me Namor.